I was taken into the ICU right away because my vitals were really bad. And there, they told me that I got to call my family, say goodbye. And the priest read me my last rites because my vitals were so bad. I was put on an ECMO. And I looked at the doctor and said, well, hold on, what's happening here? And he said, we don't know. It's not looking good. And please say goodbye and, make your peace. And that, I'm telling you, is a message you don't need, you don't want to hear. And I'm saying you don't need that message to be the message.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind Their Success podcast. Today, we are joined by Tino Dietrich. He is a multiple Inc. 500 entrepreneur, certified Mindvalley coach, and soon-to-be author who's on a mission to help high achievers reclaim their lives. After building global businesses and facing life-altering setbacks, Tino now guides leaders in mastering resilience, redefining success, and turning their relationships into true partnerships. Tino, welcome on Behind Their Success.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, Tino. So tell us about what you do.
Today, my main purpose is really to help entrepreneurs, business owners, high achievers, whoever that might be, people who have a hard time balancing what I call life and work, even though I do not believe in that term, but maybe we'll come to that later. Most people still on that train try and balance life in terms of work and home. And that's what I do. I help people to build homes and not only houses, and literally coach them in situations that I've been, I would say, way too many times in myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you're talking about obviously massive struggle for entrepreneurs, that kind of balance. And I'm with you there. I'm not a believer. I hate when I hear that term work-life balance. It's really my philosophy and approach is really around, okay, let's build a holistic life here, not one that we're trying to balance all these conflicting things. Tell us a little bit about that process, or how, a little bit high level, how you do that or how you help people.
So in general, my take on things is that a good coach, a good advisor is not going to tell you necessarily what to do, but how to do it. So that means that I'm not there to literally tell you how things should be and what you do in order to put it there, so to say, to transform your life, because that's really up to you. And most people go, okay, what does that mean? So I'll give you an example. If you ask people, tell you what they really want, they come up with a first version. And then you start digging, and there's the 5 whys, the 7 whys, if you heard about that method. But if you dig deeper, people begin to realize that their first answer may not be really what they're. That's why we call it the true marriage, the true relationship. So that's the first step. The first step is to really understand what it is that you define as happiness, as success. In business, we got numbers, KPIs, data-driven decisions that we make every day, just because we are clear and we have a plan and we have clarity. And if it's not on that plan, we're going to bring things back to. So in life, that unfortunately is not necessarily the case.
I think you're right. I think the first step is definitely understanding yourself, right? What you want, and becoming really as self-aware as possible. And then from there, you can really figure out what you want. And it's amazing, as a guy that considers himself very much into self-development and whatnot, there's layers to this, right? Of getting clarity and getting your goals. And as I keep getting deeper and deeper down in those layers, I realize, man, I've never been this clear in my life of what exactly doing, what exactly I want. And it's amazing the level of confidence you get from that. And then also the levels of anxiety that come down when you absolutely know where you're heading.
And that's one of the reasons why people who are business owners, entrepreneurs, people who get shit done, so to say, they don't want that, because in that role, you got to be a leader, right? And you almost like a machine. You function, and anything that puts that into a state where you begin to question yourself is a threat. And the natural reaction is to eliminate that threat, which is to ignore it. The issue is that you're not alone in that process. You think you are, but
Mhm.
you may have a partner at home, kids, dogs, cats, and goldfish. So everybody in that home environment, in that house environment is involved, right? And they may react and react to your behavior in a way that you don't understand because you never really thought about it.
The cool thing is I've found myself in groups and stuff over the last few years where are really, of course, we're all business owners and whatnot. And that is, I'd say, what initially brought us all together. But we recognize that life is a holistic thing and entrepreneurs can be really good. The really successful ones can be really good at bringing that massive level of intentionality right to their business. And they have all these clear thought out plans. And then once again, their home life is just a complete disaster, right? Because there
Right
is
now.
no level of intentionality there whatsoever. That is just kind of chaos. And
Yep.
they're not trying to design that to any.
To a certain degree, what happens is you go, those are the things that I hear often is when people say, hey, I'm doing everything I can. And what else? I work my fingers through the bone. I'm the life I'm offering. And when you then ask and say, but have you actually ever asked anyone that you cater to, was all what you do, was all that you give, if that's really what they want? And they're going to, what do you mean? Another car? And I go, no, maybe one car less and something else. And it's not about money and material and the bigger home and the bigger house and this and that. It is way more complicated. And people, we enter this thing called marriage or a partnership, whatever you want to call it, however you define it. And then life kicks in. And many people say like, well, and then life happened to me. And I say, no, life happens for you. And if you do not understand that, and if you continue to blame business for you not being able to dedicate time to the people who matter most to you, then what you do also is that you literally put all that blame shame on business, right? Which means that the kids look at your business as that's what's taking my dad away from me. That's what's consuming. That's what makes him, put him in a bad mood. I've had all
Mhm.
that. I heard my kids say, hey, I can change that you had a bad day at the office.
Yeah. And
I've
especially when
heard.
you bring, oh gosh, yeah. Especially bring kids into that. I have three young kids. I got two daughters and a son, like 8, 7, 5 years old. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, you want to talk about her, my oldest daughter last year, I'm a CPA by trade. My oldest daughter drew like a picture and it said like tax season and it had a bunch of sad faces.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's understanding that, like, yeah, my daughter doesn't care about business or the money or the life I provide. She wants her dad.
Yeah.
And understanding that is very important. And like I said, I've seen it time and time again of entrepreneurs that built very successful businesses and they realize when they get to the end of it that they don't have a family and they regret decisions they've made. And then they end up in some situations even hating the business they built because it
Yeah.
took.
Yeah. But that is my point. And look, I would say when I look back, and I'd say you ask me, why do I do what I do? And what do I do? When I say I help people who are in situations that I've been into, and I've
Mhm.
been into several absolutely disastrous situations, personally and professionally. I do believe that that puts me into a spot where I at least understand. I at least understand. And for me, for example, the signs that were given to me, I ignored. I
Mhm.
literally, I was like a kid that closes the eyes and say, okay, one, two,
Not a
three.
problem.
Now you can see me. You can find me. Right.
Yeah,
Um,
not a problem, not a problem.
exactly. And you're like, and then what happened to me, which was that life altering moment, that epiphany is in 2020, I ended up in the ICU. I had COVID already for quite a while. All of a sudden, I had it for a few weeks. My whole family was sick, except for my oldest son. They all recovered, and I, for some reason, I did not. And then one day I really felt bad and I got rushed into the urgent care center. And then they told me, we can't help you here. You got to go to the emergency room. And from there, things just like unfolded. And I told my wife, hey, I'll be back for dinner. We're still COVID times on one side of the house and the rest of the family on the other side was the plate in front of the door. And I said, I'll be back for dinner. And I did not come back for dinner. And I was taken into the ICU right away because my vitals were really bad. And there they told me that I got to call my family, say goodbye. And the priest read me my last rites because my vitals were so bad. I was put on an ECMO and I looked at the doctor and said, well, hold on, what's happening here? And he said, we don't know. It's not looking good. And please say goodbye and make your peace. And that, I'm telling you, is a message you don't need, you don't want to hear. And I'm saying you don't need that message to be the message. Kicks off the epiphany moment when you realize things have to change. And I prayed. For me, I cried and this and that. And I prayed and I said, allow me to get a second chance to make a first impression. And that is when I realized that life is a gift. That is when I realized I have to have a purpose in life. That is when I changed what I did to what I do today. I still run businesses and whatnot, but my main purpose is what I explained earlier. But all I'm saying is it doesn't need to get that far.
Yeah.
And yes, there have been so many signs in my life when I look back and I say, man, I'm stupid. I was so stupid. And it's not bad talk. I'm just like, dude, come on. Like many wake up calls and you're just like, nah, snooze.
Yeah. And it's as tragic and trauma, maybe that whole event would have been, but like the gift that event is in your life, perspective shifts that give you to literally look at death, right? And then life all fades away and you realize what's important, right? And to be able to get that vision. And hopefully, me and everybody listening here, it doesn't need a life or death experience to finally realize.
Yeah. And since that happened to me, I've talked to several people in similar situations, people in car crash. And it's interesting when you talk to them that all of us come to the same conclusion. And all of us have pretty much the same take on life. It doesn't matter where you came from. That post-event timeline looks very alike. Assuming that you got out of the situation in a shape or form that allows you to continue your life. There are others who are not that lucky. And I spoke to some of those people too, survivors who lost their legs and whatnot. So I'm saying is, I think life is a gift and you got to really pull the most out of it because it's been given to you for a reason. You may think like, who cares? Everybody has a life. Yeah, but it's all precious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know, you hear the stat or whatever, it's like 1 in 30 trillion or something is the odds that like your genetics would come together to even exist. And that like you go back and do like the family tree and like the 10,000 people that had to all come together and survive to like even you have a chance to be living. So thinking about that through those lens of
The legacy.
the astronomical like chances of you even being alive and being a person on the earth.
Yeah.
Let alone in today's world where you have the freedom and the ability to really explore and become a unique individual. It's not like you were born in the 1200s where you're like, and was born and eat and die, right? Like you have a lot of things that allow you to really develop and becoming your unique type of person. And it's we just take it all for granted.
Yeah. And right there, that is the problem. And when I talk about that, people are like, yeah, whatever. Because it sounds like too spiritual and blah, blah. I'm a tough guy. I run a company, I make millions of dollars. And I'm like, yeah, cool. And because when I was in hospital, I was like, okay, so if I'm now gone, how will I be remembered? I just lost my mom a few months ago. And I look at things in a different way. One day we all have to go. That's granted. some sooner, some later. You just got to think about that. And if you just, some people say, I don't give a shit if I'm remembered as the asshole. Okay, perfect. That's what you want to be remembered, but your choice, right? Life is
Yeah.
a choice, and every choice you make will determine the challenges you will face. So if that's the choice you make, okay, go for it. But a lot of people don't realize that until you bring that perspective to their life. And I think, come on, like we as dads, we about a third, I think it's at 3.4 or something, about a third of all children in America grow up without the presence of a father. I
Yeah.
mean, think
I'm
about that.
surprised it was that low.
Take kids to school, take your kids to school and count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. Just statistics, right? I'm quoting numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and we all say we want to build a good future and this and that. Why you do what you do just to do it for yourself? Okay. But if you say as an excuse, I'm doing all of that for my kids, I'm doing all of that for my wife, then do a better job.
Yeah. Or ask them that if that's what they even want. Yeah. Like that's
Well,
the biggest thing.
okay,
Right? Like we say we do all this stuff for them, but once again, have you even asked them?
But that's the point. If you ask someone for something, and trust me, my wife and I we're married for 26 years. And she puts on a dress and she's like, how do you like it? And I said, "No, I don't." She's like, well, you can say that in a nicer way. And I said, well, ask me. I give you my honest me. You ask me, I will tell you. I don't sugarcoat. I don't beat around the bush. So what you just said is ask them what they really want. Be prepared. That's what I'm saying. Be prepared for them answering that question, not the way you expect.
Yeah. Yeah. And also when you're asking that question, like also giving grace too, is because, okay, you initially engage with your wife or children. I'm like,
Mhm.
hey, what do you want? They're not necessarily even going to be able to answer that question right away either.
Right. Right.
And so because you as an entrepreneur, you realize how hard that is to figure out what you want to do and all those different things. So
Yeah.
you got to understand it's the same for everybody else. And it's a process.
It
And
is.
a partnership, like you talk about,
Right.
and exploring and figuring all that stuff out. And then everybody's on the same team trying to create a life that everybody agrees is.
It's funny because if you're like in consumer marketing and you run all these tests and you collect all the data to understand, you come up with your MVP and whatnot, and you test. And it's a process, as you just described, right? And we do that to perfection, some more, some less. But why don't we take that same dedication and put it into our lives? Because not that your wife is your consumer, you get my point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a helpful way to think about it. It's not this, obviously, we don't want to think of a relationship with these like transaction things, but in reality, that's what they are.
It is.
It
is.
is. Yeah. And it's a give and take, and it's a serious partnership. That's something I've worked on a lot in my life is really trying to just bring a level of intentionality to everything we do. And I worked with a kind of a mental mindset kind of coach all last year. And the first thing he said to me when I met him, because he's also very blunt and whatnot, and he goes, "Hey, you're just winging life.
Mhm.
All you're doing is just winging life. You don't know what you're doing or what you want. You have this vague idea of what you." And and then of course working with him and implementing a lot of these processes, I know exactly where I'm and exactly what I want in business, family, life, career, everything. I have my goals and it's not like, oh, they magically happen over. I know exactly what I want. And more importantly, I also know the actions I need to take and how to measure them.
Mhm.
Hold
Yeah.
myself accountable. And so it's just a matter of time, right? It's literally just a matter of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see that way too often. There's one thing that people say, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to embark on that journey, but they never show up at the gate. What?
Yeah, or they never even, you got to take the time to really think about like, okay, and say my relationship with my wife, what does winning look? What is a win? What is success in that relationship? Right? And work with your spouse or whatever to decide jointly, like what is success for us in our relationship and our family. And it's amazing when you get people on the same page and everybody starts working towards some ideal, how quick that can actually happen.
People say like companies, and I say, what does that really mean? A company is not something on its own. It doesn't exist. We made it up. we as
Yeah.
human beings, we
Construct.
the
Yes.
LLC or the Inc. or whatever. And it's people. It's really people coming together, believing in the same thing. And the smaller the company, the more important, because you think there's a vast majority of people working in corporate America. And if you ask them, what is your company exactly doing and why? They don't really have a full answer to that, right? They
Yeah.
may have an idea. When you break that down to that little Inc. called Family Inc., you better make sure that each member of that company is on the same page.
Yeah, and that's the most important. And the one that affects every other area, like every other area of your life. We like as humans like pretend that like we can compartmentalize that. We can have a great business, bad family, or vice versa, or whatever. But
We
like
can't.
everything affects everything. Nothing in your life is isolated from.
I agree. However, if you have issues in your company, in your professional part of life, the one at home is going to help you to
Oh,
weather the storm. Vice versa, not so much.
yeah,
Because
it'll
when
be a
you
little.
go to the office and you have a very important meeting with a very important client, you can't go in there and say, hey, I had so much stress with my daughter this morning, a 12-year-old, and it's so tough. They go like, okay, can we get on with it? Yeah. Who cares? I got kids myself. Deal with this.
That's true. And that's why, the other thing that's once again really it spurred a lot of my growth in the last few years is the community like that. A community of other entrepreneurs that are in very similar situations as me, growing businesses and have young families and everything that goes along with that. But we can I'm around people that I respect and respect their values, and we can relate on a lot of stuff, right?
Mhm.
And all we're doing there is holding each other accountable, and we tell each other what we want to do, and then we watch each other, and if the actions don't align with it, that's not what you said you wanted to do. And so that's been amazing for me at that level of accountability and people that are like literally just on the sidelines watching me, rooting me on and trying to help me in any way possible and me for them as well.
Are you looking for a new tax experience? Looking for an advisor that actually brings you high-level ideas and proactively plans so you aren't overpaying your taxes? Or how about one that even just responds and communicates in a timely fashion? If any of that resonates with you, you probably just have a tax preparer and not a tax planner. And it is through the tax planning process where all the value is found. I'm Peyton Squires. I'm a CPA and owner of WR Tax Planner. We work alongside entrepreneurs and high-income earners, helping them pay the least amount of income taxes, both legally and ethically. We have saved our clients hundreds of thousands of dollars through specific strategies, and we guarantee we can find multiple tax saving strategies that your current tax preparer hasn't told you about. If that interests you, head on over to the contact page at PeytonSquires.com. There you can fill out a contact form and get a call booked to see what it would look like to have WR tax planners on your team.
So Tina, man, like what would you say is some of the most rewarding experiences? It seems like you've kind of found your purpose, or it seems very fulfilling to you.
When you realize that before that you can make life happen for you rather than it is happening to you, you understand that you mentioned that before, and I agree 110%. Life in all these different facets around you, like a universe, has all these different angles and aspects. And if the stars begin to align for you and you get that clarity out what you do, who you are, everything begins to make sense. And
Mhm.
that is very satisfying. Some people are successful, and if you ask them why, and they can tell you why,
Mhm.
they do not have that complete satisfaction because it's almost asking someone, hey, you won the lottery. How did you do that? I mean, can I not also win the lottery? And
Mhm.
what they will say is, I just made those crosses at the right, you know, that's it. And that's not what we do. We are here, and everything we do, we should do for a reason. And only if you understand how to get from A to B and what A is and where you are and why do you want to go to B and all these things, then the journey from A to B becomes very satisfying because everything is an experience and you enjoy you enjoy that very much, if that answers your question.
Yeah. 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 And that's great. And it is amazing how how much humans like winning games or setting up journeys and how satisfying progress is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even matter what the progress is. We can make up whatever game we want to make up, that whatever goals we want to set, and then set actions and even mini goals along the way. And once again, it doesn't even matter what it is. It's got to be rewarding to you. And amazing when you find things like that and can set processes up like that in your life, how satisfying everything feels because you can measure. You're measuring. I don't know if you ever read the book, The Gap in the Game.
I
Fantastic.
did not. Mm.
Fantastic book, Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. But they're talking about where entrepreneurs are very unsatisfied is they're always measuring to the future. They're always measuring the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And obviously that's pretty unsatisfying, right? Because you can never close that because that is always the horizon that always continues to move, right? You're always going to want to try to make things better. It's measuring the gain. It's measuring backward. I always talk about always measuring, right? Because then you can see the progress you have and the massive gains you've made in different areas of life and how satisfying that is and how that is evidence to say you can keep doing it, right? You can keep getting these big gains in your life because you've done it before. You never thought you could have got to this point years ago or whatever. And it's just understanding that we're humans and you got to understand how to trick ourselves and make it a little bit.
It is interesting what you just said, because I do believe that there is one stage missing, which is the present.
Yeah.
So you can look backwards and you can look into the future. However, moment today, right now, I learned that too, is the chance to be very thankful for what you have. Of course, that's in the past, but also thankful for the opportunities that lie ahead of you. And you have 3 kids, and I'm pretty sure that people have told you, oh, enjoy. They grow up so fast. And I have 3 kids myself, 24, 21, 17. And yes, they grow up very fast. I mean, the truth is they don't grow up faster than anybody else, and time is not running faster. But what you do not enjoy is that present moment. And then you look back and you say, I should have.
Yeah.
But you can't. You cannot travel back in time. Not yet. Maybe one day we can. You can't. And that is where I'm coming from. Because again, every choice we make will determine the challenge we face.
Yeah, and it's really interesting and knowing more and more about brain science and different things that when you talk about in the present's the only thing that is real, right? Your future you're thinking about is totally made up in your head, right? You had
Yes.
No. Your past, the more and more we learn about the brain, we're really making most of that up too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because every time we recall a memory, damage that memory a little bit. We recall the memory, we damage it, and it goes back into our memory. And every time we recall a memory, it's different. And we don't think it's different or don't even understand that we do that. Really, most of our past absolutely drives everything we do is made up in our head. And you can go back and do a lot of the work and just change the story to a story that serves you. And it's going to propel you a lot further. But people don't realize it's really just all made up.
Mm. That is to that extent, people, they talk about fear, something that people most of the times tell themselves. And I say it's future events appearing real, or false events appearing real, because it hasn't really happened. And why you really fear that. And I keep telling that to my kids, because children are, when they enter the next stage or they go to college or this or that, what if? And I say, what if this? You always look at that. But what if it's not? So chances are that it could be that way or this way. So try and look at everything in a holistic approach.
Yeah. And life's all probabilities, right? Life thing has a chance of occurring and you can't control that, but you look out in the future, make your kind of best prediction and roll the dice. That's life.
But it's something that it's a big part of what I do too, is really to understand and peel off the layers of values and beliefs that we were told, right? You said the memory. And part of what you experience, also what you recall, is based on what people tell you. This is how it has to be. If you look back to the 1800s, it clearly had different understandings of different situations than we do today. I read that with caution. And people, yeah, for some people, it's super more comfortable to stay in that state. You not question the status quo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the red pill, blue pill thing, right? When it
Yeah.
comes to,
Yeah.
right. And that's why The Matrix has become one of my favorite movies of all time, just because like it's amazing how much of that just speaks to human experience, and it's almost like a documentary. And like that's really how the brain works. It's been understand it. They see it as a story, but it's such reality. Um, the world is really just made up of whatever you say, what you want for, right?
Yeah.
Let out.
And happiness is a choice, you choose. And people are like, oh, I really feel like this and this. And I said, honestly, there's nothing I can do about changing how you feel, because whatever I just said wasn't meant that way. And if you take it, and I say sometimes when you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is spill the coffee over your shirt after you got dressed, and you're already in a bad mood. You rush to the meeting, you're already like late and this and that. It all sets your state of mind. Right. And there's nothing people in that room can do to change that, because you are in that state of mind. Unless you take a deep breath, you go in there, clear screen, and you make a fresh perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just habits, right? Like, people get triggered by things and they'll have this constant negative experiences all the time. And they don't realize it's like a choice they make every single day, but they have these outside circumstances that they point to. It's just your perception of what's happening.
It is. Whatever you tell yourself is what I say.
Yeah. It's like nothing is good or bad. Just thinking it makes it so.
Yeah. And that helps to get through difficult moments as well, because that's where you can give yourself like a reality check.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So one more question for you. For that busy entrepreneur that's listening here, right? And, he or she is sitting there thinking, man, yeah, my whole life needs a checkup. I want to bring an intentionality to that. What's one piece of advice you'd give to somebody? Okay, here's where I'd start. Here's something you can just start doing now.
I would make it super simple and say, stop. Just stop for a moment. And then begin to understand, slowly but surely, who you are and where you are. Look around. And I don't mean that, but we're running and running and running and running and chasing and chasing. And that's an advice where I say, because I was forced to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't think that you need to be in that situation to do the same thing that I was forced to do. Just do it before it's too late. And just one last thing. There was a study, one of the longest studies ever conducted by Harvard University about happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And 80 years plus, a lot of people died during the study. But long story short, it was the relationships in people's lives that determined the happiness. And if you want to call someone, do it. Don't say tomorrow. Don't say, I'll fix this tomorrow. And next week we do this, honey. And do it. Use the present moment. Stop right now. Right now, whatever it is that you're doing, take a minute or two to just think about that and make it a habit. That is an advice I'll give right now, because maybe tomorrow I can't give that advice anymore.
That's great stuff. And, I've been lucky enough to have been around people in my past that have given me that advice, and something that I've gotten better and better at implementing. Having usually just like a thinking space a couple of times a week, where it's like me and a notepad of paper in 30 minutes and no agenda whatsoever. And it's just to stop and slow down. And it's amazing what comes to your consciousness at that point of things that you want to do or need to do, or ideas, creativeness that kind of pops in there because you actually stopped long enough to check in with yourself and everything.
Yeah. I'm concerned when I hear people reacting to it and saying, it's for me. And because it's considered weak or mumbo bumbo bullshit.
Just ego.
And yeah, and I say, look, think, if you're really that tough, then overcome yourself and do it. It seems you're not that tough. It seems that you're hiding behind your gorilla, lie and yell at people, and you're the strongest ape in the jungle. Who gives a shit? Excuse my French, but that's exactly what it is. This is your life, not mine. You do whatever you want.
Yeah. Man, that's great. That's great stuff, Tino. What's the best way they can connect with you and get to know more about you?
Yeah, so for this podcast, we have a special landing page, so you can find out more about us, about me. And it's dietrichinstitute.com/PS. And that again is Dietrich, spelled like my name, Diet, Rich, and Institute.com/PS.
Awesome, Tino. Anything you want to leave for the listeners before we go?
I want to thank everyone for listening to me. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. Because again, it took away from the presence. And I wish everyone a great journey.
Great. Listeners, we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you found it valuable, please rate, review, and share it. That is the best way to help us build this and reach more people, as we're trying to accomplish our goal of help creating more healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. You can follow us on social media by searching for me, Peyton Squires, or going to PeytonSquires.com. On the website and social media, we're always sharing tips of personal growth, and there we can actually interact. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.